Hello, my name is Bribe. I'm part of the Hive Workshop moderator team. I also have several resources that are available to the public here. This is my second video that I'm doing for you guys. So last time I talked about how to install Damage Engine, which you can see the screenshot for here. And what I'm looking for is today to show you guys how to use some more advanced features. So we covered the basics. So damage event source is the unit who deals the damage, the target is the one who receives the damage, and the amount is how much damage was dealt. But there's more tricks to it, such as what if you want to do things like increase the amount of damage dealt or determine what kind of damage was dealt. So let's have a look at that. So this is the damage engine trigger, which you'll see when you open up the map. We covered this in the last video. These are the spells that you've already set. But take a look here. There's damage types that you can set here. These are just some things that I came up with on my own. You can delete these, you can change them. Really the main thing is here. Damage type explosive. See how it's a -1 and the others are regular integers above 0? And that's because negative numbers and the damage types will actually cause the unit to explode if they're killed by that damage. Comes in handy. The other types are just up to you. Depends on how you want to differentiate between your damage types. But you basically set something called next damage type before using a unit damage target command from the trigger editor, and then you can recall that damage type later on. That's something that can come in handy. So moving on. For now, let's see. Anything I wanted to cover in here yet? Right, so this is a function that gets called whenever a unit is damaged. Now, next damage override next damage type. This is what I was talking about. You set this variable right before dealing your damage. 0 means that it wasn't set. Next damage override, we can get into that a little bit later. Okay, is damage spell? This boolean is going to be true if the damage was dealt by a spell such as Storm Bolt or Finger of Death. And here you can see as well if the damage event type is less than 0 and the unit will be killed by the damage, then the damage event target will explode on death, and then I deal tons and tons of damage to kill off the unit. Spell damage doesn't actually kill the unit, I have to trigger that, so you can think looking for help for that awesome fix with discovering that the negative spell damage will actually negative damage on the Rune Bracer's ability will actually indicate that the damage was dealt by a spell. Very cool stuff, and has completely changed the game. Yet damage blocking ability, let's say if you have a unit with 50 hit points and you deal 1,000 damage to it, but you want to block the damage, that's where this ability comes in. Classic damage system stuff right there. That's been around since the beginning. Okay, this is a new thing that doesn't exist in most other damage systems. After damage event. So usually when you get the damage event, what happens is that the damage amount is given to you, and the unit who received the damage, the unit who dealt the damage, that's all available to you. But the damage hasn't been applied yet. So this event actually takes place immediately after the damage is applied. I had to use a unit state event to check when the unit's life actually changes. Otherwise, you might catch it a little bit too late, or you might see the health bar flicker if there's a damage blocking ability attached to it. But overall, this event certainly helps because you have the ability to catch the unit's new life after the damage, and for purposes of let's say if you want to deal damage from a unit, but only if the other unit, forget it, it's too complicated to talk about that right now. It was requested, so I put it in there. Let's see. All right. Yep, this is all just internal stuff, nothing public in the API here. Yep, so these are your usual GUI functions here. The damage taken, the damage source, the triggering unit. See how I set those? Right there. Yep, that's all it needs. So damage event previous amount. You usually don't need to reference this, but if you do, it is usually just to determine what the amount was before any modifications. Damage event type, next damage type, yep. So see here, next damage type, I set this variable damage event type to it when the damage is taken so that you don't reference this. See how it's set back to 0 now? But this is safely locked in. So it's pretty handy. Damage event override, see, next damage override. Same thing, locks it in. The only reason why I use two separate variables is in the event of recursion. Recursion can be ugly, as you see. I have to do all this lines of code in order to accommodate for all this garbage here. Gets tedious. Let's see. Okay, this is the 0 damage event, so let's say if you add a tornado slow aura to a unit, usually fires a damage event of the amount 0, and I just say, okay, most of the time you won't need it, but in case you do, here's damage event equals 2, that's the event you want to use. Game variable damage event becomes equal to 2. Alright, next. Here, yep, see, damage event amount less than 0. This was, again, thanks to looking for helps discovery. You now have the ability to detect spell damage, so boom, is damage spell equals to true if the amount was less than 0. And I amplify the damage, as you can see up here. Damage can be processed if the target is ethereal. The damage amount is multiplied. Basically, you add 2/3 of the damage. And if they add a Loon's Grace, you subtract 20%. And if they have Rune Bracers, you can multiply it by 0.67. This all kind of depends. So whether or not you remove the ability from Rune Bracers, like Looking for Help does in his system, or whether you set the modification amount to 1.67, it's all up to you. I'm not going to get into that in this video. Alright, moving along. So, again, as I was talking about modifying damage, I have this event set up here. Damage modifier event becomes equal to 1.00. This is where you can do something like modify the damage amount times 0.5. And there's some extra modifier events here. You really don't need to be using them. They're in there for backwards compatibility. I added them at one point. I really don't think anybody's using them. But here's an interesting one. So the modifier event becomes equal to 4.00. That's like for doing something such as a cumulative shield. And what I mean by that is a shield that has a actual hit point value, such as mana shield or anti-magic shell, or if you wanted to trigger your own. So you want to get those things out of the way before any other modifiers, after any other modifiers have taken place. So let's say if this didn't fire last, because it fires after all modifiers, if it didn't fire last, you might subtract mana from the unit if it's not even needed. Let's say if one of the other modifiers sets the damage to 0, but if this one ran first, the damage is, let's say 100, so the unit lost 50 mana or whatever needlessly. So I like to run that afterwards so that you have the correct damage amount to work with. Yep, and then the regular damage event becomes equal to 1.00, which we covered in the last video. And now we're just, again, internal processing here. Keeping the unit alive if it needs to stay alive, or letting it die if it needs to die. Alright, let's see. And like I said, the variable event, not variable, but unit life event. That's what's needed here. And I don't know if that was Nestorus or Vietlol who came up with that first, but whatever the case, it works and it's really good. All right, moving along even further. Yep, that's the main stuff right here, it looks like. So that's the system. Here's some abilities that show off a little bit about what you can do. So this is so-called life drain fix. Looking for help has told me that it's not completely infallible, although it works in most cases. It works with the Dark Ranger 100% of the time in my tests. So life drain usually doesn't even fix the there's not really a fix for life drain is what I'm trying to say, aside from manually adding the life to the Dark Ranger. Finger of Death fix, yep. Let's say unit takes damage and the damage is a spell, but the order of the damage event source is Finger of Death, so you can tell right away that the unit is casting Finger of Death. So we set it to damage type explosive, which, as we covered earlier, will make it explode on death. Spell damage, again, doesn't kill the unit, so you have to predict things like explosive spell damage in order for them to work correctly. Anti-magic shell, this is again what I was covering earlier with the damage modifier event becoming equal to 4. This is all in custom script. Don't let it intimidate you. You don't need this if you don't want it. Here's mana shield fix. Basically, we just get the mana of the unit, we process it. But here's where it becomes really interesting. See, you basically want to take the damage event amount and subtract the value of the shield from the damage event amount. But you don't want to set the damage event amount to something less than 0. You have to set it to simply 0 and then subtract the amount of the shield. In this case, it's mana from the unit. Otherwise, if the damage event amount is greater than the amount of the shield that's left, then you subtract the shield amount from the damage event amount and then set your shield amount to 0 right there. If you have any questions about that, which you probably would if you're working on this, just let me know. Yeah, setting damage event types, you don't have to do that. I just do that for the demo map so that you can see it work. How to install. Alright, so we covered these 4 necessary steps in the last video. I recommend Mana Shield abilities have their damage absorb percent set to 0. You don't have to mess with Mana Shield if you don't want to. Like if you're not even using damage modification, don't worry about it. Same with Anti-Magic Shell. Locust Swarm, this is important. Looking for help identify this change needs to be done. Instead of 0.75, you set it to negative 0.75. As I mentioned, spell damage does negative damage now, and so if you try to heal yourself off of negative damage, you're actually damaging yourself, so this has to be inverted. Yeah, again, spell damage reduction ability, you can remove it or you can set it to 1.67 instead of 0.33. It's up to you, it doesn't matter. Spell damage is converted, yep, I was covering that all through the video. Life drain doesn't heal the caster, covered that. You can configure script to detect certain conditions. Yep, just damage modification right there. You don't need any custom get or set unit life functions, so I prefer this system over looking for help's physical damage detection, mainly because of this and the fact that the damage modifier event is a separate thing, and looking for help has just kind of unified everything. I prefer having sectioned off damage processing, so damage modifier event, shield damage event, a regular damage event for displaying something like a text tag, and an after damage event for those really rare circumstances where you would actually need to access the units after it's received the damage rather than before. Cross compatibility. This is a big perk right here. So this is Looking for Help's physical damage detection modified to use Damage Engine. And it's been tested. It wasn't originally, but one of the users on here tested it. I had to fix a couple of bugs, but it works now. Yeah, just a really short snippet, plugs right into Damage Engine, works well. This one I've had for a few years. This is Weep's Weep's GUI-friendly damage detection system. Really, really short here. Doesn't need much to start working. And I think that's about it. You know, how to use, we just covered that in the video. So again, yeah, I don't think that there's anything more that needs to be covered. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in, and yeah, cool. Thanks for watching.